Right. So today we are going to do. We were halfway in the distributed databases, but we'll come back to that because first I want to finish the stored procedures and triggers topic. For that, I gave you the note to the WhatsApp group. So very quickly we'll go through. Okay. So I just changed the name to constraint, stored procedures, and triggers. Okay. But first, let's finish the integrity constraints. So that is a very small topic. And actually, I don't have to do this topic because we have done this in our semester 2 database subject. Okay. Right. Anyway, let's take about 15 minutes. So integrity constraints. Integrity means keeping the connection. Right. Integrity means things are properly connected together. Right. If they are disconnected, we say they have been disintegrated. So there must be proper integrity. Okay. The constraints are the restrictions that we use to make things properly intact. Okay. Right. So there are different integrity constraints. The main integrity constraints are entity integrity constraint, because these questions are very easy and examiner always asks few questions on these constraints. Entity integrity constraint, referential integrity constraints, domain integrity constraints, right? And so there are some related things like other constraints, cascade constraints, etc. Okay, right. So let's take one by one. What is mean by entity integrity constraint? Okay, entity integrity constraint means now we remember when we are creating database, we create relations and relationships. Okay, so relations, the main concept is primary. We have set of fields and the primary key. So the primary key is important. That is where we uniquely identify a record in a table. And also primary key is again important because we map foreign keys to the primary key. So this entity integrity constraint is related to primary key. So that is very easy. The entity integrity constraint says first of all, you must know how to create a primary key. Okay, so that I'm not going to do it. Okay, so there are 3 ways. You can just mark this primary key, or you can just say constraint primary key, or you can later you can say primary key this and that. So you have to refer to your database note for that. Okay, and also foreign key, there are 2 ways. You can either say constrain your foreign key and references blah blah blah, or you can just if it is single column, you can just say this is the foreign key and this is mapped to this particular tables, this field. Okay, right. So this is one way of creating foreign key. Foreign key, your field, in this case SID. Okay, SID. References, the student tables SID. Right. So that is how to create foreign keys. That is one of the way of creating a foreign key. Okay. And of course, primary keys. This is another way of creating primary key. Just use a primary key, especially composite primary keys. You can create like that, or you can just say constraint primary key. Anyway, those are not I'm not supposed to do those things because those things you learn in your semester 2. I think for you database was in semester 1. Okay, right. Right. So what is mean by entity integrity constraint is when you have primary key, your primary key field, okay, values must be not, you can't have null values for primary key. Right. So that is what is mean by entity integrity constraint. And obviously it must be unique and you can't insert a record with a null value for primary key. So that is called entity integrity constraint, because otherwise the integrity break, right? Integrity break because null is not a value. Right. Second one is referential integrity constraints. So referential integrity constraint means when you have a foreign key, your foreign key value field must have valid value from the related table, or it must be null. For example, if you have employee and department, if you have the employee ID in your department ID in your employee table as a foreign key, all the employee IDs must be valid values in the department table. So all the department IDs must be valid values in the department table, or you can keep null. So that is called referential integrity constraint. So then there are domain constraints. So domain constraints are pretty much coming from the business domains. Like maybe someone will say that the business might say that the discount cannot be more than 50 or something like that. Okay. And there are some other domain constraints, like if it is marks, usually it is between 0 to 100. Right? So those are domain coming from the business area or the subject area. Okay, right. So of course, there are some other constraint like not null constraint. Not only primary key, you can, for example, password cannot be null. Unique constraints, maybe the email may not be the primary key, still you want to make it unique. And default constraints, if someone does not give you a value, we want to set up a default value. And some other check constraints where you can check for some complicated combinations, validations, etc. Okay, right. So do you have to refer to your semester 1 or 2 note? I can't remember for that in case they ask. Okay, I'm not doing that at all because they have mentioned about those things in your slides. Okay, and also how to drop a primary key, how to drop a foreign key. Later, how do you add a primary key or foreign key using alter table statements, right? Just refer to the your semester 1 or the 2 note. Okay, right. So then we have another set of constraints related to referential integrity or the foreign keys. So that is, we have something called on update and on delete constraints. On update constraints and on delete constraints. The possibilities are restrict, cascade, set null, set default, and no action. Okay, so these things we did when we were doing our level 1. Right. So restrict means, for example, if you have employee table and department table, if you have employees where the department ID is say department ID 3, restrict means when you have something like that, you can't delete your department ID 3. So when you try to delete the department ID 3, you will get an error saying there are related records. Cascade means when you delete say department ID 3, department 3 records, all the employees with department ID 3 will also be deleted. So if you have the cascade option. Set null means when you delete the department 3, if there are employees with department 3, set them to null. Set default means say when you are deleting the department 3 record, if there are employees with department 3, set it to the default value of that column. Okay, if you have a default value. Okay, so no action means just delete it, right? But that is usually not allowed by most databases because the moment you just delete it, it is violating the referential integrity constraint. So therefore, no action is usually not allowed, right? As a theory, you can say it, but the moment you have no action, because it is not restrict, no action, so then the referential integrity is violated. Okay, so that is something. So how do you set up this? Right? How do you set up this? So this is how you now is part of the referential foreign key, right? So you can see constraint some name, foreign key, working. So that is our field. References to department table. Okay. Sorry. So constraint FK department foreign key works in references depth on delete, cascade, on update, no action. So that is the additional restriction they have set up for the foreign key. Okay. මේ කැලක් අඩුයි references කියන table එකේ හරින field එකේ නම කියන්න ඕන. හරි department table එකේ මේ field එක කියලා. එහෙන් කියන්න ඕනේ natural key එකක් නා. So that means that table also has a field in the same name. Otherwise you have to say something like this: constraint, say FK whatever the name, foreign key. Say this is our field name, then references, your table name. It was වරහන් ඇතුළේ කියන්න ඕන table එකේ මේ field එකේ මොහොයක primary key එක තමයි. හරි ඊට පස්සේ තමයි ලියන්න ඕන on update මොකද්ද, on delete මොකද්ද. So on update it can be any of these, right? And also on delete also any of these. So I explain you the on delete. On update is pretty much the same, right? For example, if you change, but usually on update is not needed because most of the databases, they will not allow you to change the primary key, right? So if they allow you to change the primary key only, on update has a meaning. For example, say your department 3. Now you want to change not any other field, you want to change the primary key value to 3 to 4. Then on update restrict means it is not allowed if there are employees with already primary key 3, foreign key 3. So that is restrict. Cascade means when you change 3 to 4, here also all the 3 values are changed to 4. Set null means when you change 3 to 4, if there are any fields with 3, they will be set to null. Set default means they are changed to the default value. No action means you just allow it to change to 4, but these guys are still remaining 3, but that is violating the referential integrity. Okay. Right. So you can, okay. Let me start sample and show you maybe just one example. I'm just taking one of the database. We have same fours, but that has only one table. This one has 2 tables, but I think this one is not having a foreign key. I'm going to set the foreign key now. I have to set it in the employee table. Yes, it has a foreign key. Here you can see, you have to go to the relation view. Now here you can see on delete cascade, right? Here you can see on delete cascade, on update cascade. That is the current option. Okay, current option. So you can select cascade, set null, no action, restrict, etc. Okay, so now it is on delete cascade. Now let's go and delete. Okay, now I have the, let me make it a little bit smaller. Right, so let me try. I have employees with department ID 1. Okay, department ID 1. Altogether there are 4 records. I will try to delete the department 1 now. Department 1. It says cascade. Okay, I'm going to delete this. Do you really want to execute? Okay. Right, now you can see department 1 is deleted. Now let's get back to the employee. And now you can see that department 1 employee is not there. So that is what is mean by on delete cascade. If I have set it to restrict, I am not allowed to delete that record. Okay, now I hope you got it. Okay, I hope you got it. Right, so let's move on because we have limited time. Okay, so we are not going to use MySQL for other purposes. Right? Only for that purpose only I use MySQL. Okay. Right. So any questions on that? You have to refer to your semester 2 note in case of you have to refresh it. Right. So now we are moving to stored procedures. Okay, stored procedures. So stored procedures is something very easy, very easy. It's not confusing subtopic or whatever, not advanced topic. It's just an extension to your SQL. So stored procedures are the procedures stored in the database, right? In the database. Now, usually we communicate with the database using SQL. One of the issue with SQL is it's just statement. So you have to call one statement, another statement, another statement. But if you want to do this one, and if this result is like that, do that, right? If else conditions, loops, maybe I want to take it to a variable and do something else. And if you want to do that kind of things, right, what you have to do is this, right? Say usually you have to communicate with your database from your applications, okay, Java client or web client, etc. So then what you have to do is you do a one SQL call, get the result, do some processing here, another SQL call to the database, again you get something and do processing. So therefore all you are calling your database over and over, because maybe you know that you have to call 2 or 3 times, but that is waste of your time, right? The execution time, because you call it, get the results, again do something, again calling, get. But this is something related task. Always we have to do that. So the better thing is we just write that as a stored procedure and save it there. Then we just call the stored procedure. Then the stored procedure do all those table queries, because database stored procedure is in the database. Therefore, it's very fast, and you just get the result. So that is the beauty of stored procedures. Okay. especially if you have to say you want to do a money transfer from this account to the other account. So here you have to reduce from one account, add to another account. So that means two update statement. So if you do two update statements separately, there are two separate calls. But if you write it in a stored procedure, you just call the stored procedure. Stored procedure is going to update the first one, update the second one. It's going to tell you that you are done. Okay. So that is, so real world transactions are much more complicated than that. So in that case, stored procedures are really handy. Okay. I hope you got it. And again, stored procedures, they are little bit non-standard. So therefore, different databases support it in different, slightly different syntax, but the concepts are the same, but slightly different syntax, slightly different features are there. It's not like SQL where it's a standard, right? ANSI, American National Standard, but stored procedure calls syntax is pretty much database vendor specific. So that is the confusion with your notes also. Your note is sometimes using pseudocode, sometimes using Microsoft SQL, but all the past papers they are using Oracle. So I don't know why if they are using Oracle in the past papers, they didn't prepare the note using Oracle. But anyway, so we will be concentrating on the Oracle. Okay, right. So either you have to install Oracle. Okay, then you need to have some sort of a tool to connect to the Oracle. Usually installing Oracle is not that easy for a new person who is not familiar with Oracle, and also it takes a lot of resources, right? A lot of memory is needed also. So therefore, of course, if you like, you can just install it. Okay, I don't think that if you have not already done it, when the exam is nearing, you want to play with big software. So the easier thing is, I gave you the link. Go to the livesqloracle.com. Okay, and create an account. They will ask you to create an account. You just give your email or whatever and create an account. Okay, it has a very limited features, but that is enough for us. Okay, right. So I have account. So there you get something like this. So there are some built-in databases as well, right? Built-in schemas are there, but you can create. There's something called my schema by default. But only thing is, as long as you are in the session, it will be there. Afterwards, that will be lost. That is fine, right? So we are not going to do rocket science here, right? So we just do a session, then it will be lost anyway, because this is not a paid account, but that is good enough for us. Okay, right? So I'm going to do what is known as the my schema or the default schema, that by default nothing is there. So then the easiest thing to do is you can go to the SQL workbench and do something, or else we are just going to use just one table. Here there's something called create database object. Okay, or else you can go to the SQL worksheet and create a table. Okay, so it will be created on this my schema. I'm going to the SQL worksheet. It will little bit take time because this is a common, right, cloud. A lot of people are using it for experimental purposes, right? So the first thing you want to do is, you can do it parallelly with me because I shared you the note. I shared you the, I think I shared you the normal version, so that you can copy paste code also. I didn't flatten it. Okay, I think I didn't flatten it, right? If you can't copy paste, just let me know. If you can't select like that, let me know. Okay, I can share you the unflattened one, right? So just create a table. I will explain what is stored procedures and other things while we are doing it practical. Okay, just create a one table there. Just paste it here. Create table employee. ID is the primary key. Name is there, Vacha 220, and salary is a number. Just copy paste and say run. Okay, run. So you can see table created. Just double check whether you are getting this message, or else you will get error message. Okay, you can see table created. That means table is there. Okay, right now you have the table. Right, so let's insert a record also. Right, let's insert a record also. How to do that? Insert into employee, right? I'm just saying values. I didn't go for the auto number, right? I will say 1, that is ID, name, something like Amal, and I just need a salary. Okay, say 1 lakh. And 1 lakh was not the monetary, right? So, and just say run. Okay, missing select keyword. What is that? Insert into employee values කියලා දැනේ. Values. Right. Let's run it. Column not allowed. Why is that? ID, name, salary. What is that error? Column not allowed here. INSCRT. කොණ්ඩේ එකක් වෙනවනම් කියන්න ටක් මගේ අතේ වැරදුනක් නැහැ. SQL එක syntax එක. අන්නේලිය insert into table එකේ නම කිව්වා. field වල නම් ටිකක් දෙමුනේ. දීලා බලමු නැත්තම් ඒක දන්නේ නැහැ. fields වල නම් ටිකක් දෙන්න. ID, name, salary. එකක් දීලා බලමු. ID, name, salary. සමහර මේක session වලින් උඩපට වෙනවා. සමහර චුට්ටක් වෙලා ගිහලා රන් වෙනවා. දැන් බලමු. Column not allowed here. refresh करो session එක කැඩෙයිද? I'm just waiting for the page to refresh. Okay, let's write select all from select all from employee. Okay, no data found. That is fine. I'm not allowed here. මෙතන ස්පේස් දාන්න ඕනද? Eric. Column not allowed here. Okay, so let's go to the database object, schema, employee, ID, name, salary. Insert tag ගන්න වෙන විදියක් තියෙනවද කියලා? මේකට constraint දාන්න පුළුවන් මේකෙත් මම දෙක දෙනුයි දැක්කේ. What is this?
Sir, excuse?
Yes.
Sir, ඒකේ මේ name එකට single commas පාවිච්චි කරාම වැඩ කරනවා.
single
අමල් එකේ.
බලමු.
නෑ values වල.
බලමු.
අමල් එකේ single.
I will try. No, in my case, still it is not the case. You're using this tool.
Yes.
Oh, that is strange. Okay, I will use everywhere single quotes then.
ඒක ඇස දැන් මේ field names වලට දාන්න නැතුව
Quotes දාන්න නැතුව.
values එක quotes දාන්න නැතුව.
Right, now let's see then. ID, name, salary, and single quotes. Okay. Oh yes, so that is issue. Okay. Yeah. So let's add another record. Okay, just one record is enough. Okay, let's add one more record so that we can do something more interesting. So I'm going to say to. So this is the SQL statement. Say to Bimal and 1,50,000. Okay. Right. So let's try to select all. Select star from employee. Run. Right. So we have two records. Okay. We have two records. Right. Now let's move on to the stored procedures. So as I told you, stored procedures are there. You can deploy. We call it deploy. You can, or we can basically store stored procedure in the database. Okay. Right. So let's see the basic of stored procedures. I'm referring to our node. Right. So what are the advantages of stored procedures when we can do some complex data manipulation? Because we have the control structures, there's concept called variables. There are parameters to the stored procedure, in parameters, out parameters, in out parameters, and also there's a concept called stored functions where you can return a value, right? And therefore and also there's an exception handling mechanism. So many features are there, right? And also these stored procedures can be reusable because any program can call the stored procedure by name, right? By name. So therefore these codes are reusable. You don't have to write it over and over, right? And also you can give it better security control, etc., because your business logic is in the database. Okay, because stored procedure is in the part of the database. And another big advantage is, this is very, very important. Examiner is definitely going to ask the advantages of stored procedures. Another advantage is, since stored procedure is in the database, definitely performance wise better, because if that particular transaction or that particular business process need to interact with the database 5 times. Now you are not calling the database 5 times, you are just calling once, and those insert, update, delete, all those things you can write it in the stored procedure with the business logic. If this happen, do this, else do that, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So when you are doing your final year project also, one of the biggest issue you may have encountered in communicating with the database is, for example, say order processing system. So your order has items, right? Order has maybe 10 items. We don't know how many items are there. So then you have to call one times to the order table, and maybe if there are 3 order items, 3 times to the order item. Okay. So that means it's basically four database calls. Of course, you are not much interested about the performance because your one is just a final project. But in reality, we are interested, we concerned about the performance. So then you can just call a stored procedure, and stored procedure do all those inserts. Okay, right. And right, so now let's see what is the structure of a stored procedure. So you have 3 parts. Declarative part, where you can declare variables in the stored procedure. Executable part, that is where you write your SQL statements and any other control related things. Exception handling section, where in case of exceptional situation happens in your executable part, the control goes to the exception, just like the try catch block. Okay, so but we are not going to do that part because it's not mentioned in your syllabus, right? But we are going to cover other things only, right? We are going to use the declaration and executable part only. Right. So this is the syntax of stored procedure. So you just write it create, or you can write either create, or you can write create or replace procedure, the procedure name. Then you can have the set of parameters names, whether it's in parameter, out parameter, or in out parameter, and the type. So you have to do it for each and every parameter, right? You can have any number of parameters. This is just like a Java method. Okay. So there are three types of parameters called in parameters, out parameters, in out parameters, right? So then you just have to say is or as, it doesn't matter, right? In Oracle, both work. You can just at the end you have to say is or as, because we don't have curly brackets and other things. So then you have the begin and end. In between you write your stored procedure. That means you in between begin and end, you can have your declaration, executable, exception handling, etc. Okay. Right. So I just make it very interactive rather than learning theory and then go into the practice. So this is the first example we are going to do. So you can just copy paste it, and this slash is to say that execute that in the database. Okay, so it's very important to have that slash. Just copy the first one. This is our first stored procedure, right? Now we have a table also, but anyway, this stored procedure is not referring to any database table. So, okay. So this is the syntax: create or replace procedure. Why we call it create or replace is if the procedure is not there, it will create it. If the procedure is already there with this name, it will drop the existing one and build this again. Okay, so therefore, usually when we write, we just say create or replace, because otherwise, first time it is create, all the other times it is replaced. So sometimes we don't know whether that is there or it is dropped. So therefore, software developers, the database administrators always write it as create or replace, right? The procedure, your name. Here you can use either as or is, then the begin and end. So this one is very simple one. This stored procedure, and also this DBMS output put line means in Java it's something like system out println. Okay, or in JavaScript document dot print. Okay, sorry, document dot write. So this is going to print to your console. If it is SQL prompt, to your SQL prompt, right? Whatever the prompt or your log file, and it depends on the way you have start your database, right? So if you just start your database as a service, this will write it to the default log file. Okay, but we have this tool, therefore it will be DBMS output put line will be in this particular thing, because this is our command, the console. Okay, right. So now let's run it. Now this is not running. Now we are storing this stored procedure in the database. That is what we are going to do. This slash means store it in the database. That is what how we call it to the Oracle. Okay, right. Now I'm going to run it. I'm not going to get any output here, right? It's just say the statement, SQL statement output. This is a standard statement they say, but nothing has happened. But the stored procedure is now saved because there are no errors. Now the stored procedure is saved or deployed or stored in the database, right? Now we can call it. Now we can call it. How to call it? Right? So just call exec and the stored procedure name, right? So the name we use is greetings. Okay, so don't use something like those things unless you have parameter. If you have parameters only do it, but here no parameters, and just use a run. Okay, why is that? Greet exec GREETINGS. GREETINGS, right? Semicolon. Semicolon is needed. Right. Oh, why is that? Let me undo and see what is greetings. Let me execute it again. procedure created. Okay, so sometimes that happens. Maybe free service එකක් free service වල නේද? අර හිඟන්නොන්ට වගේ තමයි මේ දැන් අපිට චීන් හොඳ බහාලයක් නැහැ නේද? කැඩිච්ච මොනාරි උඩ පඩයක් නෙවන්නේ පිනට දෙනකොට. ඒ වගේ තමයි. So therefore පොඩ්ඩක් ඉවසීමෙන් කරන්න වෙනවා. හරි. right exec ඉස්සෙල්ලා වැඩ කරේ නැත්නම් මුකුත් මගේ අවුලක් මේ ඕකම තමයි මම කලින් ලිව්වේ. මොකද මේ common free service එකක් කරන සමහරලාට පොඩි පොඩි උඩ පඩ වෙනවා. හරි. right, so you got the hello world because our stored procedure is just putting hello world to the dbms put line. Okay, right, so that is the simplest stored procedure, right? We can write, and this is all at now the stored procedure is stored now in your Java program or PHP or whatever. Just like you are calling a select, insert, update, you can call these stored procedures as well. Okay, right, so I hope you got it. Right, so let's move on. You can call it like this, or you can call it like this. So this way is needed, especially when you are working with data, right? Because it's not this simple in reality. So therefore, when you are sending some data, when you are getting the results to your things, so in that kind of situation, you call it like have begin and end, right? And just call your stored procedure. Okay, so you must be getting the same output, right? So either exec and the stored procedure name, or within the begin and end, you just write it. Okay, call it. Right, so if you want to drop a stored procedure at any time, you can just say drop procedure and the procedure name, or the stored procedure name. Okay, so let's drop it also. මේක ආයෙ run කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා බලන්න ඊට පස්සේ. Right, so right, procedure dropped. Now let's see when we can call it. Right, it says it doesn't know what is greetings is because the stored procedure is now dropped. Okay, right, so then these stored procedures you can use parameters. Right, so here in this stored procedure we have 3 parameters x, y, and z. Okay, so let me explain it while we are doing this. Okay, right, so this is another stored procedure. The previous stored procedure is I have even dropped it. Okay, so this stored procedure name I have given it as find min, and I have 3 parameters x, y, and z. Okay, and x is a in parameter. In parameter means you can send data to the stored procedure. Y is also in parameter, so that means you can send data to the stored procedure. But z is out parameter, so that means you can't send data. Very important, if it is out you cannot send, but after the stored procedure is called, you can access z, and z will have some data if your stored procedure has set a value. Okay, if your stored procedure is setting z to 10, after calling the stored procedure, z will be having a data, the value called 10. So that is what is meant by out parameter. Okay, right, so in this case we have 2 in parameters and 1 out parameter. What does this stored procedure does? Of course it has a if else as well. Explain karanna. If x is less than y, we are setting the z, because z is a parameter, so therefore we can refer to it. And also you have to give the data type. I'm using number for all 3, and they must be valid SQL types: number, vacha, right, date, that kind of thing. Valid or Oracle type in this case. Right, here we are just checking if x is less than y, we are setting z dash x, else we are setting z dash y. So because what we need is a smaller one. Okay, this is not doing any database calls, right? Because first we are learning the concept. Okay, right, now let's execute, deploy this. Right, procedure created. Now you can't just call it using exec, because it's we have to access Z and see what is the value and blah blah blah. So therefore you have to do it in within begin and the other way. Okay, right. So let's do it in a proper way. Right. Remember, now we have the stored procedure. We have the stored procedure called find min, which is expecting 3 parameters, 2 in parameters and 1 out parameter. Okay. I can call it in different window, that is better, right? So then this one you can see the stored procedure, this one you can see the calling. Okay, right. So this one I'm going to keep the stored procedure and the other one I'm going to do the calling. Okay, right. So this is how you call it. Now you can see not only we have the begin end, we have declare section because we are going to send some parameters to this. Of course, you can hard code it as well, like 23 here and 45 here, but we are just making it a little bit more fancy by declaring variables. And you can see the same data type, number, because this is expecting 3 numbers. And we are starting the begin and begin. So then we are assigning A 23 some values, B, and assignment is colon equal. It's very important in stored procedures, especially in PLSQL. We call it PLSQL in Oracle. Assignment is colon equal, right? Colon equal, and not just the equal bar. Okay, so we are assigning 23 to the A, 45 to B. C is declared because there's a third parameter called C. There's a third parameter which is out parameter. So therefore, after calling the stored procedure, C will have a value. C will have value because it's out parameter. You can see that the stored procedure set the value to Z. So Z will be our C because it's passed by position. Okay, right. So then after calling it, we are just printing the value of C, right? Value of C to the console. So this is just a string. Minimum of 23 and 45 is because the stored procedure is sending the minimum value. And the minimum value it is sending as the C out parameter. So that is why we declare C and we are printing the C. Okay, so this is not deploying the stored procedure, right? Because here you can see there nothing called create or replace stored procedure. This is just like a programming code, right? We are executing in the command line. This is not going to store anything. This stored procedure is already stored. Find me. Okay, right. Now let's run it. Right, so you can see that minimum of 23 and 45 is 23, right? So if I change this to 230, 239, now the minimum must be 45, and it's a 45, right? So now you can see that we didn't send anything for C, just it's a variable, right? But now the variable C has a value because it's an out parameter. In this case, it is Z. It's passed by position. So Z has a value now. Okay. And it's very important. If it is out parameter, you can't send a value usually. Let's try to assign a value before, because I think usually it is not allowed to send a value. Okay. Let's say C 10, and let's run it. Okay, so it's allowed, right? It's allowed anyway. I thought it is not allowed, but let's change this one also. Say 20, just to check whether it's getting called. Right now, the output must be 29. Sorry, 29. Okay. Yes, 29. So that means we can assign it, but usually if you are sending the value and if you are taking the value also, both, usually we call it in out parameter rather than in parameter. Okay, in out parameter. Sorry, rather than out parameter, you call it in out parameter. In this case, I thought actually it is not allowed to send something, but it allowed to send something. But I think we cannot access that value in the stored procedure. Let's double check. Okay. Let's put up a system out DBMS output in here. See whether we can access it at the very beginning. Okay. So this pipe character, this is the concatenation. Okay, so you don't use plus or dot in stored procedures, Oracle stored procedures, you just use the pipe character. Okay, say C is, let's first write A is A. Right. I'm going to now replace the stored procedure. Now stored procedure is update. Why is that? Why? DBMS output put line is why not allowed? Here it is not A. Here it is what? X. Because this is a parameter. They are the argument. Right. Now let's see whether we get that also. Now when we call this, that DBMS output put line must also be there, right? And you can see X is 29. That means my A value is taken as X. Now let's try to access Z. Right. Earlier we accessed the X value. Now we are sending the Z also. Now we can see it is not allowed. It's changed back to X. X, Y. Why is that in statement? Right. X is allowed, but I think Y is also allowed. Yes, but I think Z is not allowed. Z is also allowed. Okay. Okay, now let's see. සමහරවිට දැක දෙරේකට නැතුව errors එනවා. දැන් මෙයා call කරලා බලමු. Z වෙනවද කියලා. So we are sending C as 10. දැක්කද? value එක යාට පේන්නේ නැහැ. So actually we send C. And we send C as 10. But because it is out parameter, the stored procedure has no value. Stored procedure can't see the Z value. About a Z value use you have to make it as an in-out parameter. In-out parameter. Then your, sorry, not Y, the Z must be in-out parameter. එතකොට value එකක් පේනවා. ඔයා දාන value එක එළියට යනවා. Now I'm going to redeploy the stored procedure. Now of course again we are printing Z. The ඉස්සෙල්ලා Z ගේ value එකක් තියුන්නේ නැහැ නේ. value එක අපිට ආවේ නැහැ. යවුවට. දැන් බලමු value එක එනවද කියලා. මෙතන Z Ds කියලා ආවේ නැහැ ඉස්සෙල්ලා. Why is that unsupported command name bar? Now it's okay. අර හිටපු ගමන් එන errors ගණන් ගන්න එපා. And now we can see Z is available. Z is available because we change it to in-out parameter. So that is why you have the in parameter, out parameter. In parameter is to send something. Out parameter is to get something. If you send something, it is not available to the stored procedure. But if it is in-out, you can send something. And if you do something to that, that is also reflected after calling. Okay, I hope you got it. Okay. Any questions? No. Right. So I already explained the in-out parameter. So there's another example given. Anyway, I will do that also very quickly. So this is another stored procedure I'm creating. Another one. Square num. Let's execute it. And it has only one in-out parameter. Just one parameter, and it is in-out parameter. You are sending the X, we are squaring it. So therefore, if you send 5 after calling, X will be 25. Right? X will be 25. So my stored procedure name is square num. Now I need just one parameter. Let's call it A. Say 5. And we are printing A again. And it must be 25 after calling. Right? I'm just saying XXX, okay? And I'm sending A here. Because it's an in-out, my value is taken, and also it is squared. Therefore, after calling it, before calling, this is 5. right? Okay, not 5, it must be A. Before calling it is 5, after calling it must be 25. Okay, I'm calling A, I'm printing A twice, right? Let's run it. But you can see before calling it is 5A, after calling A is 25 because it's an in-out parameter, and inside we are squaring the X value. Okay, right? I hope you got it. This is express stored procedures. Okay, right. So then we have a concept called stored functions. Actually, the stored function is just a special case of stored procedures. All the concept that we explain for stored procedures are working for stored functions. Only thing is stored function by default return a value. Return a value. It's not through the in-out parameters. It return a value. Okay, just like the Java method without void. But when you're writing it, you have to say create or replace function, your function name, and you have to say return what is the variable that you are going to return. So that variable you have to declare inside and you have to return, right? So whatever the value return it will be there. So you just have to say the data type only. Sorry, not the variable. You just have to tell the data type of the return. Okay. So in this case, we are returning a number. Okay, so that means you are supposed to return a numeric value. Okay, so this is very simple example we are doing. Let's deploy this stored function, right? Stored function. And we call it total customers. Right now, we are referring to the SQL also gradually. So inside, of course, the stored our function could have been written without referring to SQL, but we just want to move it to the database side as well, right? Square root and database, right? So here, what we are doing is we are select count. Now this is slightly different from our SQL. Right? Normal SQL we don't use into. So we say count star, that means count the number of records and put it into a variable total. And we have already defined the total variable as a number, okay, from employee. And that one we are returning. So that means we are returning how many number of records are there in the employee table. In our case, we have already 2 records, okay, and it's a function because we are returning something. So far, the stored procedures, they don't return anything, okay. So this is a function. So since it's a function, we have to assign to a variable because this guy is returning a number, okay. Right. So now let's call the function, stored function. Just like the previous, only thing is you need to assign it to a variable, okay. So I'm taking this. Right. So we are calling the total customer and we are assigning it to a variable number because the stored function is returning a numeric value, and then we are just printing the value, okay. And we should get 2. You can see 2 because we just insert 2 records, okay. Right. Hope you are okay with that. Right. So then there are control structures you can use. You can use if, else, if. Then there's something called case statement. Then there are 3 type of loops. The normal loop. Yeah, there's nothing called loop in your Java and other languages, but we have loop, while loop, and for loop. And this is called the default loop, while loop, for loop. Okay. Right. So let's take one by one. Okay, we'll take a small break. Okay, we'll take a small break. After the break, we are going to discuss the conditional structures and blah, blah, blah. Don't worry, the triggers will take only half an hour. Okay, so this is, therefore, we are going to take a little bit more time. Okay, we'll be starting at 8:50.